Beneath the warm sermons of a trusted pastor lay a chilling secret that would soon rock an entire community to its core. Reverend Brown was known by many as the rock of his town. His words inspired, his presence comforted, and his faith seemed unwavering. To all who looked up to him, he was the embodiment of grace, humility, and righteousness. But what they didn't know was that beneath his pious exterior, Reverend Brown harbored a hidden life, one that, if exposed, would bring shame and devastation to everything he had built. Sarah, a young woman who had joined the church with hopes of finding peace, became the unsuspecting victim of his twisted web. She was kind, compassionate, and loved by all, but her future took an unexpected turn when she discovered she was pregnant. At first, she was overjoyed, imagining a life filled with hope and the possibility of building a family. But when she shared this news with Reverend Brown, his reaction was nothing like the one she had imagined. His fury was instant. What Sarah had believed would be a joyous occasion for them both quickly turned into a battle over a decision that would change the course of both their lives. Reverend Brown, consumed with fear over the scandal it would cause, demanded she end the pregnancy, no matter the cost. But Sarah, determined to keep the child, found herself at odds with the very person she trusted the most. As we reflect on this real-life story, subscribe and don't forget to turn on the notification bell for more daily stories that need to be heard. Hit that subscribe button. And let us hear from you in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Now let's continue. Reverend Brown's influence over Sarah was undeniable. He was not just her lover, he was her spiritual leader. She had sought guidance from him on matters of faith, her personal struggles, and the direction of her life. She had believed in him, trusted him with her deepest thoughts and emotions. But as the pregnancy became more of a reality, his demeanor shifted, becoming colder and more demanding. He would not back down, and neither would she. The pressure mounted. Sarah's once vibrant personality began to fade. She grew quieter, withdrawn. She stopped attending church services, her once constant presence now a rare sight. She isolated herself from her friends, avoiding the people who cared about her. Reverend Brown's words were the only ones she heard, and his constant insistence that she terminate the pregnancy seemed to echo louder with each passing day. His threats were not subtle. He spoke of the damage it would do to his career, to his reputation. He spoke of the toll it would take on their lives, their futures. He painted a bleak picture, one that revolved entirely around the destruction of his image as a respected pastor. Still, Sarah stood firm in her decision. She believed in the sanctity of life. She had never been the type to back down, especially when it came to something as important as her unborn child. But as the days passed, she found herself questioning not just the future of the pregnancy but also her place in this relationship. Was it worth sacrificing everything she believed in for a man who could be so callous and self-serving? One night, after weeks of torment, Sarah gathered what little courage she had left and made a decision. She would stand up to Reverend Brown, no matter the consequences. She would not allow him to control her any longer. With trembling hands, she called him, asking to meet. She knew this would be the turning point. It was no longer about her pregnancy. It was about reclaiming her life. When they met, the air between them was thick with tension. Sarah took a deep breath and told Reverend Brown that she had made up her mind. She would not go through with the abortion. She would keep the baby, no matter what it cost her. His response was immediate and violent. His face twisted in rage, his calm exterior crumbling in an instant. He could not, would not, accept it. In a fit of uncontrollable anger, Reverend Brown struck Sarah, his hands landing on her with a brutal force that left her gasping for air. The shock of the blow left her stunned, unable to comprehend the depth of his fury. But there was no going back now. His grip on her tightened, his words became a blur as he continued to lash out. In that moment, everything Sarah had feared came to fruition. She knew that she was no longer safe. Her life, her future, her dreams were all slipping away. With Sarah lying motionless on the floor, Reverend Brown stepped back, his breath heavy, his heart racing. The initial rush of anger slowly began to ebb, replaced by a cold, chilling calm. He took a step towards her and checked for signs of life, but he knew, deep down, that there was no coming back from this. She was gone. In a panic, Reverend Brown called the police, claiming he had found Sarah's lifeless body on the floor and had no idea who could have committed such a heinous crime. His voice trembled, as if he were the one in shock, the one who had been wronged. He offered no explanation, only confusion and concern. His story was as believable as it was rehearsed. He painted himself as the helpless victim, unable to comprehend the tragic scene before him. But as the investigation unfolded, the truth began to surface. The inconsistencies in Reverend Brown's alibi were too numerous to ignore. Forensics experts quickly linked him to the crime scene. Evidence found at the church contradicted his initial story. Sarah's injuries were far more severe than anything he had let on, and a closer examination of the scene revealed signs of a struggle. The police had their suspect, and soon, the community would too. As the news of Reverend Brown's arrest spread, the town was left stunned. How could a man they had all looked up to, a man who had inspired so many, be capable of such an unimaginable crime? The pastor, who had once been the voice of hope and guidance, was now the subject of horror and disbelief. The trial that followed was nothing short of sensational. The media descended upon the small town, eager to cover the details of the case that seemed almost too grotesque to believe. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of Reverend Brown's guilt. Witnesses testified to the tension between him and Sarah, the mounting pressure he had placed on her, and the manipulation that had preceded the tragic event. The defense, on the other hand, tried to paint him as a man caught in an impossible situation, a man whose life and career had been destroyed by circumstances beyond his control. But it was no use. The evidence was clear, and the jury returned a guilty verdict. When Reverend Brown stood before the judge, awaiting his sentence, he could not meet the gaze of Sarah's family. He knew, deep in his soul, that he had destroyed their lives. He had taken away the life of the woman he had once claimed to love, and in doing so, he had torn apart a family, a community, and his own future. There would be no redemption for him. He had crossed a line from which there was no return. The judge sentenced Reverend Brown to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he was led away in handcuffs, the courtroom erupted into a mixture of tears and gasps. Some wept for Sarah, others for the community that had lost so much, and still others for Reverend Brown himself, who had once been a beacon of light but was now nothing more than a shadow of his former self. Violence. The healing process was slow, but the community did its best to begin picking up the pieces. Support groups formed, offering a space for people to talk about their feelings and share their struggles. Local pastors, leaders who had long been a source of strength and guidance, stepped in to help the congregation cope. It wasn't easy. The stain of Reverend Brown's betrayal was still fresh, and there were those who couldn't bring themselves to step foot in the church again. The stained glass windows, once symbols of hope and faith, now seemed to mock them. But for many, turning away from the church meant giving in to fear, and the community knew that their only path forward was to find a way to forgive, to heal, and to rebuild. The members of the congregation, particularly those who had been closest to Reverend Brown, struggled with a profound sense of loss. They had lost not only their pastor but their faith in the very institution that had been a guiding force in their lives. The betrayal of trust was one of the hardest things to overcome. Some sought solace in their belief that the truth had come to light and that justice had been served. Others found it difficult to separate the man from the message, unsure if they could ever trust again. In the wake of Reverend Brown's conviction, discussions of power, trust, and the hidden darkness that can exist within seemingly righteous individuals became more prevalent. The case served as a chilling reminder that even the most respected figures in society, whether religious leaders, politicians, or celebrities, are not immune to the potential for corruption. It raised uncomfortable questions about the dynamics of power and control, especially when it comes to figures who wield authority over vulnerable individuals. Reverend Brown had used his position to manipulate and coerce Sarah, exploiting the trust she had placed in him as both a pastor and a lover. He had used his influence to try and force her into a decision that went against her own beliefs, and when she refused, his rage turned fatal. This story served as a stark warning about the dangers of unchecked power, the importance of accountability, and the vulnerability of those who place their trust in those they look up to. For many, it was a wake-up call to be more vigilant, to never stop questioning the intentions of those in positions of authority. Trust is a fragile thing, and once broken, it can take years to rebuild. But amidst the heartbreak and the sorrow, there was one thing that could not be taken away: the memory of Sarah. Despite the tragedy that had befallen her, her legacy endured. Her kindness, her compassion, and her unwavering commitment to her beliefs lived on in the hearts of those who knew her. Sarah had been a beacon of light in her community, someone who brought joy to everyone she encountered. She had a bright future ahead of her, one filled with hope, dreams, and the promise of a new life. But that future was stolen from her, and it was now up to those who loved her to honor that memory. Her family, despite the deep pain of their loss, chose to focus on the good that Sarah had brought into their lives. They spoke of her fondly, sharing stories of her laughter, her generosity, and her ability to make everyone feel special. They spoke of how she had always wanted to help others and how she had been excited to become a mother. The loss of her unborn child, too, left an aching void, but it also served as a reminder of how precious life is and how quickly it can be taken away. As Sarah's family continued to grieve, they also worked to ensure that her memory would not be forgotten. They set up a scholarship fund in her name, one that would help young women who wanted to pursue careers in social work and community service, fields that Sarah had been passionate about. It was a small but meaningful way to give back to the world in the same way that Sarah had done during her short life. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, Sarah's family and friends gathered to honor her memory, lighting candles and sharing stories of her life. These moments of remembrance served as a balm for the pain, a way to keep her spirit alive even in the face of such a devastating loss. As the years passed, the community began to heal. The wounds of the past would always remain, but they were no longer the only thing defining the town. The church, too, began to regain its sense of purpose, though it would never quite be the same. Reverend Brown's actions had left an indelible mark, but the community found a way to move forward, together. The healing was slow, and it was imperfect, but it was progress. In the end, Sarah's story was one of tragedy, but also one of resilience. Her life, though cut short, had made a lasting impact on those who had known her. And even though her death could never be undone, the love and kindness she had shared would never fade. In the quiet moments of remembrance, Sarah lived on. As we reflect on the haunting tale of Reverend Brown and Sarah, we are left with profound questions. How do we reconcile faith with betrayal? Can the trust we place in those we admire and rely on ever truly be safe? Could this tragedy have been prevented? These are questions that linger, reminding us of the delicate nature of human relationships, trust, and the dark forces that can sometimes lie beneath the surface. What do you think? How should a community heal from such a betrayal, and how can we ensure that those in positions of power are held accountable for their actions? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so make sure to share them with us in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more gripping true crime stories. You won't want to miss our next video, where we dive into another shocking case that left a community questioning everything they thought they knew about trust and justice. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.